Before we dive into tonight's story, if you're finding these accounts valuable, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It helps more people discover these stories. And I'm curious, where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. Now, let's talk about Kentucky, Mammoth Cave, and the thing that lives in the unmapped darkness. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tom Holloway, and I served as sheriff in the town of Edmondson, Kentucky, for over 23 years. During that time, I dealt with every kind of case you might encounter in rural Kentucky, from domestic disputes to occasional murders to drug trafficking on back roads, you name it. But nothing I had encountered up to that point could have prepared me for what I faced in the spring of 1991. Edmondson County is home to Mammoth Cave National Park, the world's longest-known cave system. Over 400 miles of explored passages are found here. Geologists estimate there could be another 600 miles yet to be discovered. Of course, it's a tourist attraction on one hand, but the locals know better than to take these caves lightly. People get lost there, and sometimes even die, but sometimes they return in an intriguing manner. This story begins on April 12, 1991. It was a Friday, and I remember because my wife Linda had been after me to take the weekend off. Maybe drive down to Nashville, see some music. I was planning to do just that when the call came in around 6 p.m. "Sheriff, we've got a situation at the park." It was my deputy, Rachel Morrison, and she sounded stressed. Rachel didn't stress easily. "What kind of situation?" "Missing hiker. College kids from University of Kentucky. They went down on the historic tour this morning, and when they came back up, one of their group wasn't with them." I felt my stomach drop. The historic tour was one of the safest routes through Mammoth Cave, a well-lit 2-mile loop that thousands of tourists walked every year. You'd have to work pretty hard to get lost on that trail. "How long has he been missing?" "About 4 hours. Park rangers have been searching, but they want law enforcement involved now." I told Linda we'd have to postpone Nashville, grabbed my gear, and headed to the park. The drive took 20 minutes through rolling Kentucky hills, past tobacco farms and limestone outcroppings that hinted at the vast, hollow spaces beneath our feet. When I arrived at the visitor center, I found a group of 5 college students huddled together, all looking scared and confused. The park superintendent, a man named David Turner, met me at the entrance. "Sheriff Holloway, thanks for coming. We've got a problem. Walk me through it." David led me to a conference room where a map of the cave system was spread across a table. The historic tour route was marked in blue, a simple loop that barely scratched the surface of the massive cave network below. The missing student is Brian Oakes, 20 years old, UK sophomore. His friends say he was with them the entire tour until they reached Fat Man's Misery. He pointed to a narrow passage on the map. That's where the group squeezes through a tight section. They went single file, and when they regrouped on the other side, Brian wasn't there. Could he still be stuck in the passage? We checked immediately. He's not there. It's like he vanished in the 30 seconds it took for the group to get through. I looked at the map. Fat Man's Misery was in the middle of the tour, surrounded by surveyed passages. There was no obvious place for Brian to have wandered off to. "Show me." We geared up with helmets, headlamps, and radios, then descended into the cave. The entrance was a massive limestone mouth, cool air flowing out like the cave was breathing. We followed the paved historic tour path, passing formations with names like Frozen Niagara and the Grand Avenue. The temperature dropped as we went deeper. Even in April, the cave maintained a constant 54 degrees. Our breath didn't fog, though. The humidity was too high. When we reached Fat Man's Misery, I understood why they called it that. The passage narrowed to maybe 18 inches wide, forcing you to turn sideways and shuffle through. I'm not a large man, but even I felt the limestone pressing against my chest and back as I squeezed through. On the other side, I examined the area carefully. The tour route continued straight ahead, well lit and clearly marked, but to the right, barely visible in the shadows, was a small opening about 3 feet high. "What's that?" I asked, pointing. David frowned. "That's not supposed to be accessible. That leads to an unmapped section. We blocked it off years ago." But when we looked closer, we could see that the metal grate that had covered the opening was lying on the ground, the bolts sheared off. "Someone removed this recently," I said, running my finger along the fresh scrape marks on the stone. "Brian couldn't have done that. Those bolts required tools to remove." I shined my light into the opening. Beyond was darkness so complete it seemed to absorb my headlamp beam. I could hear water dripping somewhere in the distance and something else. A faint, rhythmic sound, like someone tapping on stone. "We need to search this section," I said. David looked uncomfortable. "Sheriff, that's not advisable. That area hasn't been surveyed in decades. We don't know what's down there. It could be unstable, could have vertical drops, could flood if it rains. We should wait for the cave rescue team from Louisville." "How long will that take?" "They can be here by morning." I looked at my watch. 8:30 p.m. Brian had been missing for 6.5 hours. In cave rescue, the first 24 hours are critical. After that, your chances of finding someone alive drop dramatically. "I'm going in," I said, "just to the first chamber. I'll turn back if it looks dangerous." Rachel had come down with us. "Sheriff, I don't think that's a good idea." "Noted. But that kid's parents are sitting up at the visitor center right now, and I'm not going to tell them we didn't do everything we could because we were worried about safety protocols." I squeezed through the opening, Rachel reluctantly following behind me. David stayed at the entrance, radioing updates to the surface team. Beyond the opening, the cave opened up into a chamber about the size of my living room. Our headlamps revealed limestone formations that looked like frozen waterfalls, and in the center of the chamber, 3 passages led off in different directions. "Which way?" Rachel asked. I listened carefully. The tapping sound was louder here, and it seemed to be coming from the middle passage. I headed toward it, moving carefully over the uneven floor. The passage sloped downward, and after about 50 feet, it opened into another chamber, this one much larger. My headlamp couldn't find the far wall, and when I shouted, the echo took several seconds to return. That's when I saw the light. It was faint, maybe 100 yards away, barely visible in the vast darkness. A flickering orange glow, like a campfire or a candle. "You seeing that?" I whispered to Rachel. "Yeah, could be Brian. Why would he have a light source?" His friends said he didn't have anything with him. We moved toward the light, and as we got closer I could make out a figure sitting beside it. The person was hunched over and seemed to be drawing something on the cave floor. "Brian?" I called out. "Brian Oakes?" The figure looked up. It was Brian, but something was wrong. His eyes were open, but he wasn't looking at us. He was looking through us, his gaze unfocused and distant. "Brian, we're here to take you back. Your friends are worried about you." He didn't respond. Instead, he went back to drawing on the cave floor. As we got closer, I saw what he was working on and felt my blood run cold. It was a map, incredibly detailed, covering about 20 square feet of cave floor. He'd drawn it in some kind of white substance, chalk or limestone dust maybe. But the detail was impossible. It showed passages, chambers, vertical shafts, all labeled with symbols I didn't recognize. "Brian, what are you doing?" Rachel asked softly. He finally spoke, but it wasn't English. The words were harsh, guttural, nothing like any language I'd heard before. He spoke for about 30 seconds, then went back to drawing. "We need to get him out of here," I said. "Something's wrong with him." We approached Brian carefully. He didn't resist when we took his arms and helped him to his feet, but he kept trying to look back at his drawing, muttering in that strange language. As we started leading him back toward the entrance, I noticed something that made me stop. On the wall beside where Brian had been sitting, there were other drawings. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all in that same white substance. Some looked old, the marks faded and barely visible. Others were fresh, and they were all maps. Different maps, different hands, but all showing the same thing: passages and chambers deep below where we were standing, and parts of the cave that had never been surveyed. "Sheriff, we need to move," Rachel said urgently. "Something about this place doesn't feel right." She was right. The air had gotten colder, and the sound of dripping water had stopped. The silence was absolute except for Brian's muttering and our breathing. We made our way back through the passages, Brian stumbling between us like he was sleepwalking. When we finally emerged through the small opening into Fat Man's Misery, David looked relieved. "Thank God. Is he injured?" "I don't think so, but something's wrong with him." "We need to get him to the hospital." We made the climb back to the surface. Brian's parents rushed to him when we emerged, but their relief turned to confusion when they saw his condition. He was still muttering in that strange language, his eyes unfocused, his hands making drawing motions in the air. The ambulance took him to Caverna Memorial Hospital in Horse Cave. I followed, wanting to make sure he was okay and hoping he could tell me what happened down there. At the hospital, the doctors were baffled. Physically, Brian was fine. No injuries, no signs of hypothermia, blood work normal. But mentally, he was gone. He wouldn't respond to questions, wouldn't acknowledge his parents, just kept trying to draw on anything he could reach: the hospital sheets, the wall, the floor. I stayed at the hospital until midnight, then headed home to get some rest. Linda was waiting up, worried. "Did you find him?" "Yeah, we found him. But Linda, something strange happened down there. Something I can't explain." I told her about the maps, the strange language, Brian's condition. She listened quietly, then said something that stuck with me. "Tom, people have been disappearing in those caves for hundreds of years. Native Americans, settlers, explorers. Maybe there's something down there that doesn't want to be found." The next morning, I went back to the hospital. Brian's doctor, a woman named Susan Park, met me in the hallway with a grave expression. "Sheriff, we need to talk. Brian's condition has deteriorated." "What do you mean?" "He stopped muttering about an hour ago. Now he's only drawing. We had to restrain him because he was trying to use his own blood when we took away the markers." She led me to his room. Through the window I could see Brian strapped to the bed, his arms covered in white sheets where he'd apparently drawn all over them with a marker before they'd restrained him. "Has he said anything in English?" "Just once, about 20 minutes ago. He looked right at me and said, 'They're waiting below.' Then he went back to muttering in that language." I felt a chill run down my spine. "They're waiting below" was exactly what had been written in those old exploration journals from the 1880s. "Did you get a language expert to listen to what he's saying?" "We called a professor from UK's linguistics department. She's on her way." Dr. Park let me sit with Brian for a while. He didn't acknowledge my presence, just kept making drawing motions with his restrained hands. I noticed that his movements followed a pattern, like he was tracing the same map over and over. The linguistics professor, Dr. Margaret Whitfield, arrived around 10 a.m. She was an older woman, maybe 65, with sharp eyes and a skeptical expression. She listened to Brian's muttering for about 15 minutes, recording it on a tape recorder, then asked to speak with me privately. "Sheriff Holloway, where did you say you found this young man?" "In Mammoth Cave, in an unmapped section." And how long was he down there? About 6 hours, as far as we know. She was quiet for a moment, then played back a section of her recording. Sheriff, I need you to understand something. I speak 12 languages and can recognize fragments of maybe 30 more. What this young man is speaking isn't any modern language. It's not even any historical language I'm familiar with. But there are phonetic similarities to pre-Columbian Native American languages, specifically some of the Mississippian cultures that lived in this region before European contact. That's impossible. Brian's from Cincinnati. He's never studied Native American languages. I know, that's what concerns me. There's something else. She played another section. Listen to this part carefully. I heard Brian's voice on the tape. Kituwa, Sipokni, Oklahoma. Those are Shawnee words, Dr. Whitfield said. Or at least, they're close to Shawnee. He's saying something about the old people, and the red earth, and the sleeping place. But he's using them in a context and with a grammar that doesn't match any recorded Shawnee dialect. What does that mean? Either this young man is a linguistic savant who's somehow constructed an artificial language based on extinct Native American tongues, or she trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Or what? Or something down in that cave taught him to speak it. Before I could respond, we heard shouting from Brian's room. We rushed back to find nurses trying to calm him down. He was thrashing against his restraints, his eyes suddenly focused and wild with terror. "Sheriff!" he screamed when he saw me. "Sheriff, you have to listen. They're not evil. They're just alone. So alone. They've been waiting for so long and they just want to be remembered. Someone has to remember them." "Brian, who? Who are you talking about?" "The old people. The first people. They lived in the deep places before the world was different. Before the sun was the sun. They're still there, Sheriff. In the deep rooms. And they need us to remember. They need us to keep the record." Then, just as suddenly as he'd become lucid, he went back to muttering. But now he was crying, tears streaming down his face, his voice desperate and sad. Dr. Park sedated him, and within minutes he was unconscious. But his hand still moved, still traced those maps in the air. "Sheriff, I need to ask you something," Dr. Whitfield said. "Those drawings you mentioned seeing in the cave. Were there dates on any of them?" "I didn't notice any." "Why?" "Because I want to know how long people have been doing this. How long something has been calling them down there." I drove back to the park, my mind racing. I needed to see those drawings again, needed to understand what was happening. David Turner met me at the visitor center looking haggard. "Sheriff, we've got a problem. We sent a team down to photograph those drawings you saw, but they couldn't find them." "What do you mean, couldn't find them?" "The passage you went through last night? When our team tried to enter it this morning, it was blocked. Solid limestone, like it had never been there at all." "That's impossible. I walked through it. Rachel was with me." "I know. That's why we need to talk." He took me to his office and pulled out a leather-bound journal, old and water-stained. "This belonged to my grandfather. He was a park ranger here in the 1960s. He wrote about something he called the calling. Every few years, someone would go missing in the caves. They'd find them eventually, but they'd always be changed, speaking in strange languages, drawing maps of places that didn't exist, talking about the old people waiting below. Why haven't I heard about this before? Because the Park Service buries it. Tourism is worth millions of dollars to this county. The last thing they want is stories about caves that drive people crazy or call them into the darkness. But people have a right to know if there's danger down there. Is there, though? Think about it, Sheriff. The people who get called, they all come back. Changed, yes, but alive. Whatever's down there doesn't kill them. It just talks to them, shows them things, makes them want to remember. I looked at the journal, at pages filled with names and dates. The earliest entry was from 1893. The most recent was from 1984. How many? I asked. 73 documented cases, probably hundreds more that were never recorded. I flipped through the pages, seeing the same pattern repeated over and over. People disappear in the caves. People are found in unmapped sections. People come back speaking dead languages and drawing maps. People die within weeks, still trying to draw, still trying to remember. Wait. They die? David nodded grimly. All of them, eventually. Usually within a month. The doctors can never explain it. No physical cause, no disease, they just fade away, like whatever they learned down there was too big to fit in a human mind and it slowly tears them apart. I thought about Brian, restrained in that hospital bed, still trying to draw even in sleep. We have to stop this. How? We can't seal the caves. We can't guard every passage. Whatever's down there has been here for thousands of years, maybe longer. It's patient. It waits. And when it wants to call someone, walls don't stop it. Barriers don't stop it. I spent the rest of the day researching, calling experts, trying to find anyone who could help. But everywhere I turned, I found the same story. Mammoth Cave had been drawing people into its depths for as long as humans had known about it. Native American legends spoke of voices in the stone and the keepers of old memory. Early settlers talked about people who went into the caves and came back blessed or cursed, depending on who you asked. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Brian's words. They're not evil. They're just alone. What kind of thing lived in absolute darkness for millennia and just wanted to be remembered? At 3 a.m., my phone rang. It was the hospital. Sheriff Holloway, you need to come to Caverna Memorial immediately. What's wrong? It's Brian Oakes. He's awake, and he's asking for you specifically. He says he has something important to tell you. Something about 3 days. I dressed quickly and made the drive to Horse Cave. When I arrived at Brian's room, I found him sitting up in bed, his restraints removed. His eyes were clear, focused, but infinitely sad. "Sheriff," he said as I entered, "thank you for coming. I don't have much time." "Brian, what do you mean?" "The doctors say you're physically fine. The body is fine. But the mind, Sheriff, I learned things down there. Saw things humans weren't meant to see. And now I can't forget them. They're all I can think about. The old people, the deep rooms, the time before time. It's too much. Too big. In 3 days, my mind will break completely. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." "What do you mean, that's how it's always worked?" He gestured to his bedside table, where dozens of pages covered in those strange maps lay scattered. I can see them now. All the others who were called. I can see their maps, their memories, their knowledge. 73 people before me, all the way back to 1893 and hundreds more before that, back into the mists of time. They're all still there, Sheriff, in the stone, in the deep places, waiting. Waiting for what? For someone to remember them. The old people lived in the caves long before humans walked the surface. They were here when the world was young, when the sun was different, when the stars weren't where they are now. They went deep into the earth when the world changed, when they couldn't live above anymore. And they waited. They're still waiting. And every few years they call someone down to remember them, to keep the record, to make sure they're not forgotten when the universe finally ends. Brian, that's impossible. Geologists say these caves are millions of years old, but life has only been on Earth for The old people aren't from Earth, Sheriff. They were here first, before anything you'd recognize as life. They've been here the whole time, sleeping in the deep rooms, and sometimes they wake up just enough to call someone down, to share their memory, to make sure they're not alone in the dark. He pulled out one of his maps, the most detailed one I'd seen yet. It showed passages descending miles below the known cave system, past the water table, past the limestone bedrock, into spaces that shouldn't exist. In 3 days, I'll die. And when I do, part of me will go back down there. We'll join them in the deep rooms. We'll become part of the memory. But Sheriff, you need to understand something important. He grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. They're going to call again. Maybe not for years, maybe not for decades, but they'll call, and the next person who goes down, the next person who sees what I've seen, they need to know they're not going crazy. They need to know they're part of something older than they can imagine. Promise me you'll watch for them. Promise me you'll help them understand. Brian, promise me, Sheriff. Someone has to keep the watch. Someone has to remember the ones who go down. Please. I looked into his eyes and saw something ancient looking back at me. Something vast and incomprehensible and infinitely lonely. I promise, I said. Brian smiled, and for a moment he looked peaceful. Thank you. That's all they wanted. Just someone to remember. Just someone to keep the watch. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were vacant once more. He picked up a marker and went back to drawing, lost in those vast memories from the deep. 3 days later, Brian Oakes died peacefully in his sleep. The official cause of death was listed as brain aneurysm of unknown origin. His parents took his body back to Cincinnati, and the drawings he'd made were filed away in the Park Service archives. But I kept one, a map showing passages and chambers deep below Edmonson County, in places no one had ever explored. And I started keeping my own journal, documenting everything I'd learned, everything Brian had told me. Because I'd made a promise, and because I understood now what David Turner's grandfather had known. Someone has to keep the watch. Someone has to remember the old people in the deep places. Someone has to be ready for when they call again. That was 33 years ago. I'm 79 now, long retired from the sheriff's department. But I still watch, still wait, still keep the journal updated with every report of strange behavior around the caves, every tourist who comes back changed, every whisper of voices in the stone. The old people are still down there, still waiting, still alone. And someday soon, they'll call again. When they do, I'll be ready, because that's what the watch is for. To remember, to bear witness, to make sure they're never forgotten. Even if remembering slowly kills us, piece by piece, until we join them in the deep. 7 years passed between Brian Oakes and the next calling. 7 years of watching, waiting, documenting every strange occurrence around Mammoth Cave. I'd retired from the sheriff's department in 1995, but I couldn't walk away from the watch. I'd made a promise to a dying boy, and I intended to keep it. The new sheriff was a woman named Rebecca Torres, 38 years old, smart as a whip, and skeptical of anything she couldn't see with her own eyes. When I tried to brief her about the cave callings during her first week on the job, she listened politely, then suggested I might want to talk to someone about my retirement adjustment. I didn't blame her. If someone had told me this story before I lived it, I wouldn't have believed them either. But on March 15, 1998, Rebecca Torres called me at 7 a.m., her voice tight with the kind of tension that only comes from encountering something you can't explain. "Tom, I need you to come to the park. Now. What happened? Just get here. And bring your journal." I arrived at the Mammoth Cave Visitor Center to find 3 park service vehicles, 2 ambulances, and Rebecca's patrol car clustered in the parking lot. The morning was cold, frost still clinging to the grass, and I could see my breath in the air. Rebecca met me at the entrance, looking like she hadn't slept. "Tell me you weren't making it up," she said, without preamble. "Tell me you weren't just some old man with cave fever or whatever the hell this is." I wasn't making it up. Who got called? Dr. Michael Turner. 42 years old, professional spelunker, has explored caves on 5 continents. He came down yesterday for a permitted research expedition into some of the deeper mapped sections. When he didn't surface by midnight, the park rangers went looking. They found him at dawn. Where? That's the problem. They found him in a section called the Violet City Entrance, but Tom, he'd written his way there, with maps, dozens of them covering every surface he could reach, maps showing passages that don't exist. She led me down into the cave system. We descended through tourist paths I'd walked 100 times, past Mammoth Dome and the river Styx, until we reached an area closed to the public. The park superintendent, still David Turner after all these years, was waiting for us. "Tom," he said grimly, "it happened again." Dr. Michael Turner was sitting cross-legged in the center of a large chamber, surrounded by papers covered in those familiar white markings. But unlike Brian, who had used limestone dust, Michael had brought supplies. He'd covered notebook pages, cave walls, even his own clothes with intricate maps. And he was speaking. Not muttering, like Brian had, but speaking clearly in that same guttural, ancient language. "Dr. Turner?" Rebecca called out. "Michael, can you hear me?" He looked up, and I saw the same vacant expression I'd seen on Brian's face 7 years ago. But there was something else, too. Recognition. When his eyes found me, he smiled. "Watcher," he said in perfect English. "The Watcher has come. They said you would. They've been waiting to show you." "Show me what?" He gestured to the maps spread around him. "The pattern, the network, the dwelling places. All 73 have been leading here. Every map, every drawing, every person called. We've all been pieces of one larger map, and now it's almost complete." Rebecca looked at me, her skepticism finally cracking. "Tom, what the hell is he talking about?" I knelt down beside Michael, careful not to disturb his drawings. "Michael, what did they show you?" "The deep rooms, the sleeping places, the chambers where they wait. Tom, they're not just in Mammoth Cave. They're everywhere. Under Kentucky, under Tennessee, under half the continental United States. There's a network down there carved before humans existed, and it's all connected. Every cave system in the region, all part of one vast structure." He pulled out a map, this one showing not just Mammoth Cave, but dozens of other cave systems across several states, all connected by passages drawn in that white substance. "This can't be real," Rebecca said. "We've surveyed these caves. We know what's down there." "You've surveyed the top layer," Michael said. "The accessible parts. But below that, below the water table, below the limestone bedrock, there's another system, ancient, vast, and occupied." He went back to drawing, his hands moving with impossible speed and precision. "I have 3 days. Brian had 3 days. All of us have 3 days to complete our part of the map before the knowledge becomes too much. 3 days to add our piece to the record." "How do you know about Brian?" I asked. "Because I can see his memories now. When they called me down, when they opened my mind to receive the knowledge, I could see everyone who came before. All 73. And, Tom, I can see what's coming. The 75th. The one who will complete the map. The one who will finally understand what they're trying to tell us." Over the next 3 days, I barely left Michael's side. Rebecca stayed too, her skepticism giving way to a grim determination to understand what was happening. Michael drew constantly, stopping only when exhaustion forced him to sleep for a few hours before starting again. Dr. Margaret Whitfield, the linguistics professor who had examined Brian, came down from University of Kentucky to study Michael's speech. She recorded hours of him speaking in that ancient language, and what she found chilled me to the bone. "Sheriff Holloway," she said on the second day, "I've been comparing Michael's speech patterns to Brian's recordings from 1991. They're speaking the same language, using the same grammar, even the same intonation patterns. But here's what's impossible. Some of the words Michael is using didn't appear in Brian's vocabulary. It's like the language is evolving, or like Michael has access to parts of the language that Brian didn't. What does that mean? It means whatever is teaching them this language is getting better at it, learning how to communicate with human minds. Or, ... quote. She paused, uncomfortable. Or it means there are multiple entities down there, and they're taking turns communicating. Different voices, different dialects, all part of the same ancient tongue. On the third day, Michael's condition began to deteriorate. His hands shook as he drew, and his speech became fragmented, mixing English with the ancient language. By evening, he was barely coherent. Rebecca and I sat with him as the sun set, knowing what was coming. "Tom," he said, his voice weak, "I need to tell you something. About the pattern, about what they're trying to do. I'm listening. They're not trying to hurt us. They're trying to save us. The old people, they've seen this before. Civilizations rise, flourish, and then destroy themselves. They've watched it happen again and again over millions of years, and each time they try to leave a record, try to warn the next civilization. That's what the maps are. That's what the knowledge is. It's a warning. A warning about what? About the deep time. About cycles so long that we can't even comprehend them. They're trying to show us that we're not the first and we won't be the last. And if we don't learn from what came before, we'll make the same mistakes. We'll dig too deep, reach too far, and wake things that should stay sleeping." His eyes closed, and for a moment I thought he'd slipped into unconsciousness. But then he grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "The 75th will come soon, maybe in 7 years, maybe in 14. But when they do, you have to help them understand. Have to help them complete the map. Because once it's complete, once all the pieces are assembled, we'll finally be able to see what they've been trying to show us for 200 years. What will the map show? The way down, the path to the deep rooms, the route to where they sleep. Someone will have to go there eventually. Someone will have to see them face to face, and when that happens, everything will change." Michael Turner died that night, peacefully, just like Brian had. The official cause of death was listed as cerebral edema of unknown origin. His maps were photographed and filed away, but I kept copies, adding them to my growing collection. Rebecca stood with me at Michael's funeral, watching as they lowered him into the ground. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I thought you were crazy." "Hell, I still think this whole situation is crazy. But you weren't lying. I wish I had been. So, what now? We wait another 7 years for the next one. That's what the watch is for. To wait, to document, and to be ready when they call again. But I couldn't just wait. I needed to understand more." I spent the next year diving deep into research, tracking down every historical reference to the caves I could find, and what I discovered changed everything. In the archives of the Filson Historical Society in Louisville, I found a leather-bound journal from 1881, written by a man named Colonel Henry Davis. Davis had led an exploration team into Mammoth Cave, one of the first serious scientific expeditions into the deeper reaches of the system. The journal started normally enough, documenting passages, formations, and distances, but about halfway through the tone changed. Davis wrote about finding pre-existing structures deep in the cave, chambers that were too regular to be natural, too ancient to be human work. His final entries were disturbing. July 15th, 1881, we have found the dwelling, carved into living rock at a depth I estimate to be 3,000 feet below the surface. The symbols on the walls are unlike anything in recorded history. Morrison has become obsessed with copying them, will not leave the chamber even to eat. July 18th, 1881. Morrison died this morning, still clutching his drawing tools. Before he expired, he spoke in a language none of us recognized. The others are becoming afraid. I have ordered a retreat to the surface, July 20th, 1881. We have sealed the passage leading to the dwelling. May God forgive us for what we found there, and may no one ever open that seal. The expedition had 5 members. According to historical records, only 3 returned to the surface. Morrison died in the cave, and another man named Wells disappeared entirely. His body never recovered. I showed the journal to David Turner. Did your grandfather ever mention Colonel Davis or the 1881 expedition? Not that I recall. Why? Because I think Davis found what Michael was talking about. The dwelling, the deep rooms, and I think it's still down there, sealed up since 1881. Tom, even if that's true, we can't go looking for it. That depth, that far from any mapped passage, it would be suicide. I'm not suggesting we go looking. I'm saying we need to be ready for when the next person gets called, because I think they're going to lead us there. Each person adds a piece to the map. Michael said the 75th will complete it. That means we're getting close to the end of whatever this is. The years passed. 1999, 2000, 2001. I kept the watch, kept the journal, kept waiting for the next calling. Rebecca and I developed a protocol. If anyone went missing in the caves, if anyone was found speaking in strange languages or drawing maps, she'd call me immediately. In 2003, I had a heart attack. Not severe, but enough to remind me I was 78 years old and wouldn't be around forever. I started training Rebecca in earnest, sharing everything I'd learned, every pattern I'd documented. She needed to be ready to take over the watch when I was gone. I still don't fully understand what they want, she said one evening as we sat in my living room surrounded by maps and journals. If they're trying to warn us, why make it so cryptic? Why not just tell us? Because they're not like us. They don't think like us. Time moves differently for them. Communication itself is probably a concept they struggle with. Imagine trying to explain color to someone who's been blind from birth. That's what they're dealing with. They're trying to share knowledge that human minds weren't designed to hold. And it kills us. Every time. But they keep trying, because whatever message they're trying to send is important enough to keep reaching out, even knowing we'll die from receiving it. In 2005, I turned 80. My health was failing, and I knew the next calling might happen without me. So I did something I'd been planning for years. I wrote everything down, every detail, every pattern, every piece of the puzzle. I compiled all the maps from all 73 victims and had them professionally analyzed. And I found something extraordinary. When you overlaid all the maps, correcting for scale and orientation, they formed a cohesive whole. A path leading from the historic tour area of Mammoth Cave, through increasingly difficult passages, down vertical shafts, past underground rivers to a depth of approximately 4,000 feet below the surface. And at the end of that path, all 73 maps showed the same thing. A large circular chamber marked with the same symbol over and over. Dr. Whitfield helped me research the symbol. After months of work, she identified it as a Proto-Muskogean glyph, meaning the place of waiting, or the sleeping hall. Tom, if this is accurate, if all these people have been drawing pieces of one master map leading to a specific location, then whoever gets called next is going to have the clearest picture yet of how to reach it. I know, that's what scares me. Because what happens when someone actually gets there? What happens when we finally reach the old people in their sleeping hall? The answer came in 2007. I was in the hospital, recovering from pneumonia, when Rebecca called me with news I'd been dreading and anticipating for 16 years. Tom, we have another one, and this time it's different. Different how? It's a park ranger, someone who knows the caves better than anyone, someone who's spent 20 years exploring every surveyed passage. Tom, I think this might be the one who can actually make it to the dwelling. Her name was Jessica Blackwood, and she was 41 years old. She'd been leading a research team into some of the deepest mapped sections of Mammoth Cave, when she suddenly stopped, looked at the wall, and began to draw. By the time I checked myself out of the hospital against medical advice and made it to the park, Jessica had been drawing for 12 hours straight, and the maps she was creating were the most detailed yet. She was drawing not just the path, but instructions, how to navigate vertical shafts, where to find stable anchors, which passages flooded and when, which routes were too narrow for standard equipment. She was creating a guide, a manual for reaching the dwelling. When I finally saw her, sitting in that chamber surrounded by her drawings, I knew this was different. Unlike Brian and Michael, who had seemed lost in the knowledge they'd received, Jessica was focused, purposeful. She knew exactly what she was doing. "Sheriff Holloway," she said, when she saw me speaking in clear English, "I've been waiting for you. They told me you'd come. The Watcher, the one who keeps the record. Jessica, do you know what's happening to you? I know everything. I can see all of them. All 73 who came before me. Brian, Michael, all the others going back to Morrison in 1881. I'm number 74, Sheriff, and I know what that means. What does it mean? It means I'm the guide, the one who charts the path. The 75th will be the witness, the one who actually goes down and sees them. But they need my maps to get there. That's why they called me. That's why they chose a park ranger who knows these caves better than anyone living." She showed me her maps, and I saw immediately that they were different from all the others. Where previous maps had been symbolic or abstract, Jessica's were practical. Precise measurements, detailed warnings, even estimated times for each section of the descent. "Jessica, you know what happens on the third day. I know, and I accept it. Because this is bigger than me, bigger than any of us. Sheriff, the old people have been waiting for millions of years. They've watched countless civilizations rise and fall, and now they've finally found a species capable of understanding what they need to share. We're so close. One more person, the 75th, and everything they've been trying to tell us for 2 centuries will finally be revealed." I watched her draw for 3 days, documenting everything. Rebecca watched too, and for the first time, I saw not just acceptance in her eyes, but understanding. On the 3rd night, Jessica stopped drawing. She looked at me with those distant eyes and smiled. "It's time. The knowledge is complete. Tell the 75th that the path is clear. Tell them the old people are waiting, and tell them not to be afraid. Death isn't the end, Sheriff. It's just another kind of transformation. We all go down into the dark eventually. Some of us just get to see what's waiting there a little sooner." Jessica Blackwood died at dawn on the third day. But unlike the others, her final moments were peaceful, almost joyful, as if she could see something wonderful just beyond the veil. I was 82 years old, in failing health, and I knew I wouldn't live to see the 75th, but I'd done my duty. I'd kept the watch, I'd documented the pattern, and I'd compiled the complete map, all 74 pieces assembled into one comprehensive guide to the deep places. Rebecca stood with me at Jessica's funeral, and I handed her the journal, the maps, all my years of research. "It's yours now," I said. "You're the watcher, and when the 75th comes, you need to be ready, because Jessica was right. This time will be different. This time, someone is going to make it all the way down. And what do you think they'll find?" I looked at the compiled map, at that symbol repeated over and over at the end of the path, the place of waiting, the sleeping hall. "The truth," I said, "about where we come from, where we're going, and what's been watching us from the deep places since before we learned to walk upright. And God help us all when we finally learn it." That was 17 years ago. I'm 99 now, writing this from a nursing home in Horse Cave. My body is failing, but my mind is still sharp enough to remember, still sharp enough to watch. Rebecca calls me every week with updates. No new callings yet, but it's been 17 years since Jessica. 7 plus 7 plus 3. The pattern suggests the next one is coming soon. The 75th, the witness, the one who will finally descend into the deep places and see the old people face to face. I won't live to see it, but Rebecca will, and she'll have everything she needs to help them complete their journey. The maps are ready, the path is clear, the sleeping hall awaits, and in the deepest parts of Mammoth Cave, 4,000 feet below the surface of Kentucky, something ancient stirs in its sleep, sensing that after eons of waiting, someone is finally coming to remember them. The watch continues. It always continues. Until the last watcher falls, until the last map is drawn, until the last person descends into the deep and brings back the knowledge that will change everything we think we know about our place in this ancient, mysterious universe. They're waiting below, and soon, someone will answer their call. Sheriff Rebecca Torres had been keeping the watch for 17 years when the 75th calling came. She was 55 years old, weathered by years of knowing things most people couldn't imagine, and she'd been preparing for this moment since Tom Holloway handed her that journal and told her what was coming. It happened on October 31st, 2024. Halloween. Rebecca would later reflect on the irony of that timing, as if whatever lived in the deep places had a sense of theater. The 75th was a woman named Dr. Jennifer Marshall, a 34-year-old geologist from MWT who'd come to Mammoth Cave to study limestone formations. She'd been down in the caves dozens of times over the past 5 years, always professional, always following protocols. But on Halloween morning, during a solo research expedition in the authorized scientific areas, something changed. The park rangers found her at 2 p.m., sitting cross-legged in the rotunda, one of the largest chambers in the historic section. She was drawing on the cave floor with limestone dust, and she was speaking in that ancient language Rebecca had heard on Tom's recordings, but never in person. Rebecca got the call at 2:15. "Sheriff, it's happening. You need to come now." By the time Rebecca arrived, Dr. Marshall had covered 50 square feet of cave floor with intricate drawings. But unlike all the previous victims, she wasn't just drawing maps. She was drawing figures, beings, tall, elongated forms with too many joints, too many limbs, shapes that hurt to look at because they seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3. "Jennifer?" Rebecca called out, approaching carefully. Dr. Marshall, can you hear me? The woman's head turned with mechanical precision. When her eyes found Rebecca, they were completely black. Not the pupils, the entire eye, like looking into empty space. "Watcher," she said in perfect English. "The Watcher is here. They said you would come. They said you would understand." Rebecca felt her skin crawl but kept her voice steady. "Jennifer, I'm Sheriff Torres. I know what's happening to you. You're the 75th. Yes, the witness. The one who will descend, the one who will see what all the others could only imagine." Her voice had an odd quality, like multiple voices speaking in unison. "Tom Holloway kept the watch. You inherited it, and now the watch will end." "What do you mean, end?" "Because the purpose will be fulfilled." 74 drew the map. "I will walk it. And when I return, if I return, there will be no more callings. The knowledge will be complete. The warning will be delivered. And humanity will have to choose what to do with it." Over the next 3 days, Rebecca watched Jennifer transform. Unlike the others, who had deteriorated as the knowledge overwhelmed them, Jennifer seemed to be adapting, growing stronger, as if her mind was changing, evolving to accommodate what she was learning. She drew constantly, but her drawings were different. Where the others had drawn maps and symbols, Jennifer drew instructions. Detailed procedures for the descent. What equipment to bring, what to leave behind, how to navigate sections where reality itself became unstable, how to protect your mind from the weight of deep time. On the second day, Jennifer spoke to Rebecca in her own voice, lucid and clear. "Sheriff, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to die on the third day. The pattern is breaking. All the others were mapmakers, translators, teachers. But I'm different. I'm the student, the one who's meant to receive the full knowledge and survive it. How do you know? Because they're preparing me. Changing me. I can feel my neurons rewiring, my brain chemistry shifting. They're making me capable of understanding what I'm going to see. It's terrifying and beautiful, and I don't fully understand it, but I know it's necessary." "What are you going to see?" Jennifer smiled, and for a moment her eyes flickered back to normal. "The truth. About deep time, about the cycles, about what came before us and what will come after. Sheriff, humanity thinks it's the pinnacle of evolution, the crown of creation. But we're just one iteration in an endless cycle. The old people want us to know that, need us to know that, before we make the same mistakes they did." "What mistakes?" "That's what I'm going to find out." On the third day, Jennifer didn't die. Instead, she stood up, gathered her drawings, and turned to Rebecca with eyes that were now permanently black. "It's time. I'm going down. You can't." The descent Jessica mapped out would take weeks. "You don't have supplies. You don't have equipment. I don't need equipment. They've been preparing the path. Passages that were sealed are opening. Routes that were impossible are becoming stable. The dwelling wants to be found. After millions of years of waiting, the old people are ready to be seen." Rebecca made a decision. She'd been preparing for 17 years, and she wasn't going to let Jennifer face this alone. "Then I'm coming with you." Jennifer studied her with those impossible eyes. "You'll die. Your mind isn't prepared like mine is. The deep places will break you." "Maybe. But Tom Holloway asked me to keep the watch, and the watch doesn't end until the knowledge is delivered. If you're going down there, someone needs to witness it. Someone needs to bring the story back." Jennifer nodded slowly. "The Watcher unto the end." "They'll accept that. But Rebecca, you need to know what you're agreeing to. The dwelling is 4,000 feet below us. Past water, past limestone, past the laws of physics as we understand them. And once we start descending, we might not be able to turn back. I know. They prepared as best they could. Rebecca called the park superintendent, now David Turner's son Tim, and told him what was happening. He wanted to stop them, wanted to call in the National Park Service, the National Guard, anyone who could prevent what he saw as a suicide mission. But Rebecca pulled rank. Tim, I'm the sheriff of this county, and this is my jurisdiction. Dr. Marshall is going down, and I'm going with her. You can document this however you want, but you're not going to stop us. They entered through the historic entrance at dawn on November 4th. Jennifer led the way, moving with confidence through passages she'd only seen in maps drawn by dead people. Rebecca followed, carrying minimal gear: flashlights, water, a first aid kit, and Tom Holloway's journal. The first hour was easy. They followed the tourist paths, descended into sections Rebecca had walked dozens of times. But then Jennifer turned into a passage marked closed, unstable, and everything changed. The passage shouldn't have been accessible. There should have been gates, barriers, warning signs, but they were all gone, cleared away as if they'd never existed. The passage opened before them, smooth and clear, almost as if it were welcoming them. "Do you see that?" Rebecca asked. "The walls?" "Yes, they're changing, adapting, making the path easier." As they descended deeper, Rebecca began to notice impossible things. Passages that curved in ways that hurt her eyes. Chambers where the laws of perspective didn't work correctly. Formations that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. "Jennifer, I can feel it. My mind, something's wrong." "No, something's right. You're perceiving more than you usually do. The deep places exist in more dimensions than the surface world. Your brain is adapting to process information it's not designed to handle. It's overwhelming, but you'll survive it." They descended for hours, past underground rivers that flowed upward, past chambers where the walls pulsed like they were breathing, past formations that looked like frozen screams, and everywhere, on every surface, were the marks, the maps left by all 74 who had come before. Rebecca recognized Brian's style, Michael's precision, Jessica's detailed annotations, all of them leading deeper, pointing the way. After 6 hours, they reached a vertical shaft. Jennifer peered down into absolute darkness. This is where it gets difficult. The shaft drops 300 feet, straight down. Jessica's map says there are natural handholds, but Rebecca, at this depth, your mind is going to start playing tricks on you. You might see things that aren't there, hear voices, feel presences. What about you? I'm already seeing them. Have been since we started. The old ones are watching us. Excited, I think, in their way. They've been alone for so long. They descended the shaft slowly, feeling for each handhold. Rebecca's arms burned, her breathing labored. But more than the physical strain, she felt the weight of the deep. It pressed on her mind like a physical force, filling her thoughts with images and sounds that couldn't be real. She saw Tom Holloway, young and vital, smiling up at her from the darkness below. She saw Brian Oakes still drawing his maps. She saw all 74 victims standing in the darkness, pointing the way down. "They're not real," she whispered to herself. "They're not real." "Their memory made solid," Jennifer said from below. "The cave remembers everyone who's died in it, and in the deep places memory has weight, has substance. Don't be afraid of them, they're guiding us." At the bottom of the shaft they found water, an underground river flowing with a current that defied gravity, moving in circles that should have been impossible. Jennifer waded in without hesitation. "We swim from here. The river will take us where we need to go. Trust the current. Rebecca had no choice but to follow. The water was ice cold and thick, more like syrup than water. It pulled at her, dragged her down, but Jennifer was right. The current knew where they needed to go. They swam for what felt like hours, though Rebecca's sense of time had broken down completely. She might have been in the water for minutes or days. All she knew was the cold, the dark, and Jennifer's voice calling to her from ahead. "Almost there." I can feel them now. They're close. They're so close. Then the current released them, depositing them on a shore of smooth stone. Rebecca crawled out of the water, gasping, and looked up. They were in a chamber so vast her flashlight couldn't find the walls. The ceiling, if there was one, was lost in darkness. And everywhere, carved into the living rock, were symbols. The same symbols from Brian's drawings, from Michael's maps, from all 74 who had come before. But these were the original, the source. Ancient beyond measure, carved with impossible precision into stone that should have been harder than diamond. "The dwelling," Jennifer whispered. "We found it." In the center of the chamber, Rebecca's light found something that made her mind rebel against accepting what she was seeing. Structures. Not natural formations, but architecture. Buildings, or something like buildings, carved from single pieces of stone, their geometry wrong in fundamental ways, and around the structures, standing perfectly still, were the old people. They were tall, maybe 10 feet, their bodies elongated and angular. They had too many joints, too many limbs, and their heads were the wrong shape, elongated and flattened. They looked like they'd been designed for a gravity field different from Earth's, for an atmosphere humans couldn't breathe. And they were old. Rebecca could see it in every line of their stone-like bodies, in the way they stood perfectly still, conserving energy, waiting. They'd been waiting for millions of years. Jennifer walked toward them without fear. "Hello," she said. "I'm the 75th, the witness. I've come to see, to learn, to remember." One of the old people moved. The motion was slow, deliberate, like it was remembering how to move after eons of stillness. It raised one limb and pointed at Jennifer, then at Rebecca. And then it spoke. The sound was unlike anything Rebecca had ever heard. Not words, not language, but pure meaning transmitted directly into her mind. Images, emotions, knowledge flooding into her consciousness faster than she could process. She saw the old people's history, saw them arrive on a young Earth, a world so different from now it might as well have been an alien planet. Saw them build their civilization, their cities, their monuments. Saw them thrive for millions of years, and she saw them make their mistake. They dug too deep, reached too far, found something in the deepest places of the Earth, something that had been there since the planet formed, something that should have been left sleeping. And when they woke it, their civilization ended. Not quickly. Over thousands of years they faded. Their numbers dwindled. Their cities crumbled. And finally, the survivors retreated into the deep places, sealed themselves away, and waited. Waited for the next civilization to rise. Waited to deliver their warning. Waited for someone to come who could understand what they needed to share. Don't dig too deep. Don't reach too far. Some things should stay buried. Rebecca fell to her knees, her mind overflowing with the weight of millions of years of history, of knowledge, of warning. She was screaming, but couldn't hear her own voice over the torrent of information. Jennifer caught her, held her, and somehow the flood stopped. "It's too much for her," Jennifer said to the old people. "She can't hold all of it. Just give me the knowledge. I'll carry it back." The old person who had spoken moved closer. It reached out with one elongated limb and touched Jennifer's forehead. For a moment, both of them glowed with a light that shouldn't exist so deep underground. Then the old person withdrew, and Jennifer's eyes returned to normal. She looked at Rebecca with profound sadness. I have it. All of it. Everything they need us to know. But Rebecca, you need to leave. Now, your mind can't take much more of this place. If you stay, you'll break. What about you? I'm staying. I'm the witness, the record keeper. I'll stay with them in the deep places, learning their history, understanding their warning until it's time to share it with the world above. But that might take years, decades. You need to go back. Tell them what happened. Tell them the watch is over. The 75th has descended, and the knowledge is being gathered. I can't leave you here. You have to. This is what I was called for. What I was changed for. I can survive down here now. You can't. Rebecca wanted to argue, but she knew Jennifer was right. Already her mind was fragmenting, unable to cope with the reality of the deep places. She had maybe hours before she lost herself completely. Jennifer helped her back to the underground river. Follow the current upstream. It will fight you, but keep swimming. Eventually, you'll reach the vertical shaft. Climb. Don't stop. Don't look back. And when you reach the surface, tell them the truth. Tell them the old people are real. Tell them the warning is coming. Tell them to be ready. Rebecca swam. She climbed. She crawled. And finally, after what might have been hours or days, she saw light. Natural light from the surface world. She emerged from the cave on November 7th, 3 days after descending. Tim Turner and a full search team were waiting, having feared the worst. Sheriff Torres! Thank God. Where's Dr. Marshall? Rebecca looked back at the cave entrance, at the darkness that now held secrets humanity had been waiting millions of years to learn. She's staying. She's with them. Learning. When she's ready, when she has the full knowledge, she'll come back. But until then, the watch is over. We've done what we were meant to do. They tried to search for Jennifer, but every passage she and Rebecca had followed was sealed again, blocked with fresh stone as if it had never been disturbed. The old people were protecting their dwelling, allowing only those they called to find their way down. Rebecca spent the next week in the hospital, recovering from hypothermia, exhaustion, and what the doctors called severe psychological trauma. But she knew the truth. Her mind had been changed by what she saw in the deep places. She could never be the same. She retired from the sheriff's department in December, moved to a small house near the park where she could watch the cave entrance every day, waiting for Jennifer to emerge, waiting for the knowledge to be ready. Tom Holloway died in January 2025, 2 months after Rebecca's descent. She was at his bedside when he passed. His last words were, "Did she make it? Did the 75th see them?" "Yes, Tom. She saw them, and the warning is coming." He smiled and closed his eyes, the watch finally complete. That was 6 months ago. Jennifer hasn't emerged yet. But Rebecca sees signs, passages opening and closing, strange lights in the deep, and sometimes, late at night, she hears that ancient language echoing up from the depths. The old people are preparing to share their knowledge. The warning they've been trying to deliver for 200 years through 75 human vessels is almost ready. And when it comes, when Jennifer Marshall finally climbs back to the surface carrying millions of years of accumulated wisdom and cautionary tales, the world will have to listen. Because buried deep beneath Kentucky, beneath half the continent, is evidence that we are not the first. We are not unique. We are just the latest in an endless cycle of civilizations that rise, flourish, and inevitably reach too far. The old people learned that lesson the hard way. They're trying to save us from the same fate. Whether we listen or not remains to be seen. Jennifer Marshall emerged from Mammoth Cave on July 15, 2025, After 8 months in the deep places, Rebecca Torres was there, as she had been every day since Jennifer descended, watching the entrance, waiting. She didn't walk out. She crawled, pulling herself into the sunlight with limbs that barely seemed to remember how to work. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes had remained that deep, complete black. But she was alive, and she was smiling. Rebecca ran to her, calling for the medical team they'd kept on standby, but Jennifer raised one hand, stopping them. No hospitals. No doctors. Not yet. I need to speak, need to share what I learned before the human parts of me forget. Her voice was strange, layered, like multiple people speaking in harmony. They took her to Rebecca's house, set her up in the living room with water, food, and recording equipment. Jennifer ate mechanically, her body going through remembered motions while her mind was clearly elsewhere. I was with them for 8 months, she began. But in the deep places, time doesn't work the same. For me, it was closer to 8 years. They taught me their history, showed me their mistakes, and gave me the warning to bring back. Over the next 3 days, Jennifer spoke. Rebecca recorded everything, filling dozens of hard drives with what might be the most important knowledge humanity had ever received. The old people weren't from Earth. They'd arrived 400 million years ago, during the Devonian period, when life was just beginning to crawl onto land. They'd come from somewhere else, fleeing something Jennifer couldn't quite describe because human language lacked the words. They'd built their civilization in the caves, in the deep places where they felt safe. For 200 million years, they thrived. They developed technology that made ours look like stone tools. They mastered genetics, physics, even the fundamental forces of the universe. And then they made their fatal mistake. They dug too deep, Jennifer said, her black eyes distant. Below the limestone, below the bedrock, below the mantle. They found something at the core of the earth, something old, something that had been sleeping since the planet formed, and they woke it. What was it? Rebecca asked. They don't have a name for it. Neither do we. It's not life as we understand it. It's something else, something fundamental. The old people called it the pressure. It exists at the border between matter and energy, in spaces where physics breaks down, and it doesn't like being disturbed. The old people's civilization ended over thousands of years, not through violence or catastrophe, but through pressure. Subtle, insidious, reality itself pushing back against them. Their technology began to fail in inexplicable ways. Their bodies started to break down, their minds fragmented. They realized too late that by disturbing the pressure, they'd made themselves targets. Something at the core of the earth had become aware of them and was systematically eliminating them. The survivors retreated to the deepest caves they'd carved, sealed themselves in, and waited for the pressure to lose interest. They'd been waiting for 200 million years. And they're still not safe, Jennifer said. The pressure is patient. It remembers. As long as the old people exist, it knows where they are. It's slowly, molecule by molecule, reaching up from the core to crush them. In another 1,000,000 years, maybe 2, it will finally reach the dwelling, and they'll be gone. Why tell us this? Why the warning? Because humanity is doing the same thing. We're digging deeper, drilling for resources, building underground facilities, exploring the mantle. And we're getting close to the place where the pressure sleeps. The old people can sense it, can feel the disturbances we're creating, and they know that if we wake the pressure fully, our civilization will end just like theirs did. Jennifer pulled out a notebook. Inside were drawings, incredibly detailed, showing locations around the world. Places where humans were digging too deep, oil wells, geothermal plants, deep-sea drilling operations, scientific boreholes. These are the danger zones, places where we're getting too close to the pressure. If we continue drilling in these locations, we'll wake it. And when it wakes, it will do to us what it did to them. How do we stop it? We don't. The pressure can't be stopped or controlled. It's fundamental. Like gravity or time, all we can do is avoid disturbing it. Stay away from the core, stop drilling so deep, accept that there are parts of our planet we're not meant to reach. Over the following weeks, Jennifer shared everything. Technical details about the danger zones, historical evidence of previous civilizations that might have encountered the pressure, and most importantly, the biological changes the old people had detected in humanity. We're already being affected, Jennifer said. The pressure is aware of us. It's been aware since we started serious deep drilling in the 1960s. That's when the old people started calling more frequently. They accelerated their warning system because they could see the pressure beginning to notice us. What kind of effects? Subtle ones. Increased seismic activity in areas where it shouldn't occur, electronics failing near deep drilling sites, reports of strange sounds from deep holes, and in the workers who spend time in the deepest places, there are changes. Psychological mostly, but building. The pressure works slowly, but it's already begun. Rebecca had to make a choice. Jennifer's story was incredible, unbelievable, and exactly the kind of thing that would get them both labeled as insane. But she'd seen the old people. She'd felt the weight of deep time. She knew it was real. She spent 2 months compiling everything into a coherent report. Jennifer's testimony, the maps from all 75 victims, historical evidence, geological data about anomalies near deep drilling sites. She packaged it professionally, added her own testimony as a law enforcement officer, and sent it to everyone she could think of. Government agencies, scientific institutions, media outlets, anyone who might listen. The response was predictable. Most ignored it. Some sent polite rejection letters. A few called her directly to suggest she seek psychiatric help. But some listened. A geologist at USGS took it seriously enough to start investigating. A journalist for National Geographic wanted to do a story. And most importantly, a deep drilling operation in Russia that Jennifer had identified as a danger zone was quietly shut down, officially for budgetary reasons. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Jennifer couldn't stay in Kentucky. Her body and mind had been too changed by her time in the deep. She needed darkness, needed the cool, stable temperature of caves. Being on the surface for too long caused her physical pain. "I'm going back," she told Rebecca in September, "not to the dwelling. The old people have shared everything they needed to. But to the caves, I'll live there, in the upper levels, close enough to the surface to interact with people, but deep enough to be comfortable. Will you be okay? I'll be alive." That's more than the other 74 got. And I'll keep watching, keep warning people. The old people showed me how to sense the pressure, how to feel when we're digging too deep. I'll be their alarm system, their canary in the coal mine. Rebecca helped Jennifer set up a small camp in one of the sealed-off sections of Mammoth Cave. Park officials objected, but Rebecca pulled strings, called in favors, and eventually got them to look the other way. Jennifer Marshall had become something between a hermit and a prophet, living in the darkness, emerging occasionally to update her warnings about deep drilling sites. Scientists who braved visiting her in the cave came back changed. Some became advocates for limiting deep earth exploration. Others went mad trying to reconcile what they'd learned with their understanding of reality. Rebecca continued the watch, though its nature had changed. No longer waiting for the next calling, but protecting Jennifer, documenting her warnings and trying to convince a skeptical world that, underneath Kentucky, Underneath all of us, something ancient and terrible slept, and we needed to stop poking it. In 2027, a deep-sea drilling operation in the Pacific, one of Jennifer's identified danger zones, reported strange readings at 35,000 feet below sea level. Instruments failing inexplicably. Workers reporting feelings of being watched. Sounds from the drill shaft that shouldn't be possible. They shut down the operation. The pressure had noticed them. Jennifer emerged from the caves long enough to tell Rebecca, "It's beginning." The pressure is waking up. Not fully, not yet, but it's become aware of us. We have maybe 20 years before it starts actively targeting our civilization. 20 years to stop digging, to pull back, to give it time to go back to sleep. Will we? Jennifer's black eyes reflected no light. I don't know. The old people thought their civilization would listen to warnings too. They had prophets, watchers, people like us telling them to stop. But they didn't listen until it was too late. Humanity has the same choice now. Stop digging or face the same fate. Rebecca is 62 now. She's writing this account in her house near Mammoth Cave, looking at the entrance where Jennifer emerged 2 years ago. The camp in the caves is still there, but Jennifer rarely emerges anymore. She's become more of the deep, less of the surface, her transformation continuing. But her warnings continue. Through Rebecca, through the few scientists brave enough to visit her, through dreams that people living near caves sometimes report having. The old people's message is spreading, slowly, meeting resistance and skepticism, but spreading nonetheless. We have a choice. Listen to the warning from a civilization that came before us, or ignore it and dig deeper, drill further, reach for the places we're not meant to touch. The pressure is waiting, patient, ancient, and inevitable. It doesn't hate us, it doesn't fear us, it simply exists at the border between physics and something else, and it will crush anything that disturbs its sleep. The old people learned that lesson across 200 million years. They're still dying from it, still hiding in their dwelling 4,000 feet below Kentucky, waiting for their final end. We can learn from their mistake, or we can make it ourselves. The watch has ended. The 75s have all been called. The maps have been drawn, the path has been walked, and the warning has been delivered. What we do with it is up to us. But in the deep places, in caves all across the world, in places humans aren't meant to go, there are still signs for those who know how to read them. Still warnings carved in stone by creatures that knew the dangers of reaching too far. And if you listen carefully, on quiet nights when the wind doesn't blow and the world is still, you can hear them. The old people, whispering up from the depths, repeating their warning over and over in a language older than humanity. Don't dig too deep. Some things should stay buried. The pressure is waiting, and it remembers everything.